Hi, welcome to this episode of Author Eke. I'm Travis Davis, your host. Tell us your story. Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Author Eke. And today we have Gramps, and I'm going to let him introduce himself and divulge whatever information he wants about himself and his books that he writes and his organization that he really supports that I'm excited to hear about. Gramps, all yours, man.
Appreciate you inviting me. So my latest book is a children's book called I Don't Want to Turn 3. Now, the reason I wrote this book, living this past year because of the pandemic, caused by COVID-19, in isolation, except for being able to be with my family, kind of gave me a chance to watch and interact and with my grandkids. I got to tell you, what a trip that was. All six of my grandkids have completely different personalities. Now, one thing they do have in common is the curiosity, sense of
Right.
curiosity. How excited they get when they do accomplish something or see something. So watching them grow to year and hearing how they interact with each other really is the basis for this book, I Don't Want to Turn 3. What goes through a toddler's mind?
Mhm.
The parents are so desperate to understand. When does a toddler really understand the difference between me and us? This book explores how the whole family finds this out together.
Mhm.
But as a baby boomer, and you're a baby boomer too, so we
Oh,
can
yeah.
relate to this. You know,
Proud. Yay, baby boomers go.
I also tried to understand how the world has evolved since I was 3 years old.
Yeah.
And that's also part of the story. My parents, they didn't have cell phones, they didn't have the internet, they didn't have cable TV, they didn't have remotes. I was my dad's remote. He said, "Son, go change the channel." I was the remote at the time,
My
and
grandma
so.
didn't have indoor bathroom when I was
Oh,
three.
really? There you go.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a whole different world now.
I know.
My parents' definition of discipline is so quite different than the parents of today. Has today's world maybe for a better place for children to grow up in? Well, I'll let your listeners kind of answer
Yeah.
that question. How are we treated growing up versus they were treated today? So that's kind of the synopsis of the book. Is it
Mhm.
explores the children really learning together.
So what? So I have seven grandkids, and they are all different. I mean, all different. So how did you come up with the age? And they range. Mine range from age 6 to 22. So how did you come up age three? Well, so what was age three? Was that just as you see it in your grandkids that something was evolving then, or why age three? I'm interested in that.
Well, when I wrote this book, the kids were 1 to 8.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a bunch of them, 2, 3, and 4.
Uh-huh.
And it was like you could just see it happening at age 3. That's when they started to start questioning things. The book is based on, I don't know if you've
Yeah, let's
seen.
see that bad boy.
Yeah, it's called I don't want to turn 3, and the book is based on a true story. This really is what happened. Well, these are children's books, so I can tell you a story. They're only
Oh, heck,
20 minutes long.
that's all
Yeah,
about.
yeah, it's that Jordan is going to be celebrating his third birthday, and he was interacting with his other uh, kids, and they were playing. He kept stealing all their toys. That's what happened, and then they all came together, and they found out on his birthday that he had this pile of all their toys, and they all got upset. And so the father got them together in a circle, and the oldest, Olivia, who was 8 at the time,
Mhm.
says that they all should donate their toys to the homeless kids downtown. And that's
Nice.
what happened. So that's kind of what the story is based on. The all the
There's
pictures.
still hope for the next generation. There's still hope.
Oh, I
So,
think so. Yeah, the pictures are all based on pictures I had taken. Like
uh-huh.
the one on the cover is
Yeah.
that's Levi and Jackson in the tub. Levi loves wearing his goggles in the tub. So these are those are
Nice.
based on real stories. But yeah, there is hope. When you think about it, I am thoroughly convinced that this generation of children, the kids 1 to 10 years old today, are going to be
Mm.
the greatest generation this country has ever produced. And why? I mean, well, as soon as they come out of the womb, they're on the internet. They
Right.
understand electronics. I mean, I didn't get on the internet till I was 40 years old. Here you got these kids coming out and they've got this. So what we as baby boomers, grandparents, we have got to get involved into their lives. We
Mhm.
have got to be able to create that balance of you got all this great information you're learning on the internet and through electronics. Let's round you out and teach
Right.
you things that we knew when we were growing up, because that's
Right.
what's going to make this the greatest generation ever.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting. We were up in Arkansas visiting my grandkids a couple weeks ago, and we were all sitting out in the front porch, and normally we'd sit inside or something. We were all sitting outside. It was hot, but everybody was playing outside. Not one of them was on their phone. Not one of them was they were all just and I remember that. That's what I remember as a kid, right? With my friends or my cousins, we just play outside until it was time to go get lunch. Then we go play again, or it got dark. We had to go back home. So I really like that. So what? How do you write? You write like during the day, or what? Do you do anything else? Or so tell us a little, your background.
Well, what I really got me into writing was the craziest thing is when I was in college, my best friend and I decided we were going to do a backpacking trip through Europe. And
Oh,
so
nice.
we went to spent 11 weeks in Europe.
Mhm.
We were riding the trains, we were sleeping in youth hostels, we were running motorcycles, doing everything you did when you were a kid
Right.
that you could do that. But I decided at that time I was going to keep a journal. So I kept a journal for every single day that we had, and I
Oh,
wrote this
wow.
journal, and it was a journal about people and meeting and all that
You
kind of
were the
stuff.
first travel blogger.
Right. So I wrote this journal. I was a college kid. I gave
Yeah.
a copy to my friend and put it away. He called me about 10 years later. He says, "You got to read this journal." He says, "What you wrote and what you observed." He says, "You got to make this into a book." I
Yeah.
said,
Yeah.
"Well, I'm a business guy. I was spending my early career in department store and off-price retailing,
Mhm.
and then in wholesaling. And so I was a corporate guy doing these things. And
Yeah.
then I decided that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And so I went out and I started a couple businesses.
Mhm.
One I sold to investors, the other one I took public. And the one I
Mhm.
took public became the premier business to business site on the internet where we sell in case quantity to small businesses all around the world, shipped in all 50 states, around 40 foreign countries. Our
Mhm.
customer base were the moms and the pops who are surviving, thriving as the chains. So
Nice.
we had this site, I had this business going, and I was getting these phone calls like 30 a week. How do I do this? These are entrepreneurs and small businesses.
Mhm.
So I decided to write a book. So my first book was a book called The Secrets of Retailing: How to Beat Walmart. And this is a step-by-step guide. There's 15 chapters involved on, how do you open a store? How do you hire people? How do you find location? Where do you find your merchandise?
Mhm.
How do you do your marketing online? How do you do your marketing traditionally? And so in the last chapter, the 15th chapter, is how do you sell your business? How do you exit it? How do you get
Mhm.
out of it? So that was really my really first book, and it was Ariana Huffington had read it, and she asked me to contribute to the Huffington Post. So I've written over 100
Mhm.
articles for the Huffington Post on all kinds of things for small businesses and growing businesses. But most of my articles have been about nonprofits, and the reason being
Right.
is the nonprofit world found our site. And because they could buy products at wholesale and closeout
Mhm.
prices, we were able to help them stretch their dollars and service more people. So a lot of my articles are about the homeless and
Mhm.
teaching and children and all that. And so
Right.
that's why I was kind of excited that my granddaughter Olivia came up with the idea of giving all their toys to the homeless, because that fell right into what my
Exactly.
philosophy has always been. So
Exactly. That's interesting.
that's
And
how
so
I
you
got it.
went from writing a professional book to writing about kids, because you probably saw people in the boardroom that were acting like kids that should be acting like adults. It's like, hey, you need to turn 30. I mean, you need to grow up. So that's an
Well,
interesting dichotomy.
Well, that brings up really the main lesson in my book, my children's book. At what age do we actually begin to take responsibility for our actions? Is
Mhm.
it 3 years old? Is it
Yeah.
13 years old? Is it 23 years old? We as baby boomers, we know plenty of people at 63 that still don't take responsibility for their actions.
Oh, yeah.
So that's one of the key messages in this book.
That's interesting. As a baby boomer, I can relate to this because I think there is a untapped wealth of knowledge of people that are in the baby boomers that a lot of businesses have just kind of discarded, right? When they do layoffs or when they do any kind of downsizing, they look at that. They have to look at the age and everything. And I think there's a tremendous loss of knowledge in corporations today by trying just to keep the people that are probably paid the lowest because they're entry level, right? They're the younger people, which I agree they all need to come up and really start, but they need mentors, and those the baby boomers and the ones after the baby boomers, those are the mentors that need to be kept in, in business, in industry and business world today.
Well, let's take that a step further. Let's talk about, we as grandparents, the reason the baby boomers may be smart is because we made so many mistakes.
Yeah.
If you take a look at if we take every decade, if you look back to each one of your decades, you've made a bunch of mistakes, but you've learned from it. And that's why we have to share all that information.
Yeah.
You're talking about the boardroom, and I'm talking about grandparents. We've got to be able to share that information
Yep.
with our grandkids. And the sad part is too many grandparents really don't care. The latest survey has that 30% of grandparents are classified as remote, which means they don't really get involved in their children's lives.
Mhm.
When you think about it, that's one out of every three of us. One
Right.
out of every three. We say it. I'm sure you've talked to other your friends. They say,
Mhm.
"Hey, I raised some great kids. They'll raise the kids. I got my own life to live. I got some things to do.
Yeah.
I got the places to visit. I don't have time for them." But that means one out of every three of us are not involved.
Mhm.
Now they may show up at a birthday or they may come at a
Right.
Christmas, but that's it.
Mhm.
And so you got to ask yourself, what has caused that? Why are there so many of us just not involved in it? And a lot of it is caused by us. We may not like the spouse or child married.
Mhm.
Okay, so all of a sudden we've got stress
I love
involved.
my son-in-laws. I'm going to get that on record. I love my son-in-laws.
Okay, so we got that. Make sure he listens to this. Okay.
Oh, I'm going to send it to them. They better listen to it.
Yeah, yeah. We give unsolicited advice to our children. They don't want that. We
Yeah.
we may show up, just drop by their house one day.
Mhm.
They don't want that. So we cause a lot of those issues. When you think about grandparents and what we should be doing with our kids, we undermine their authority by how what they're teaching their children. They don't want us to tell their children something different than what we're telling them.
Mhm.
We tend to play favorites. Now, you and I both know you got 7, I got 6. We can't say who our favorite is, but we do have a favorite. There's a favorite out there, but we can't talk about it.
Mhm.
You shouldn't show that, because once you do that, you're causing problem with these kids.
Well, I know the one thing that I've done with my grandkids, I don't know how it happened. They love to compete with me. I mean, from bowling to playing pool, they love to compete. And when they beat grandpa, it's like you gave them a gold medal in the Olympics. So my grandson was down a couple weeks ago for his birthday, 22nd birthday. My grandson, 22, he spent the last 2 birthdays with us. He likes spending his birthdays with his grandparents. And so what I did, I take him bowling, but if I win, I make him carry my ball out to the car and I take pictures of it and send it to his mom. And the last 2 birthdays, she's got a picture of him carrying my ball out to the car. Even though he's a fantastic bowler, I change the game as we as we go a little bit. But I like to see the competition because that does something for me. It makes me stay in shape, right? It makes me want to be more active. But then again, it makes them be competitive, and I do not let them win. They have to win. I don't. I tell them, you're not. I'm not going to give you anything. They
Yeah,
got to win.
it goes back to what you're talking about mentoring. That's part of our mentoring job.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
those are the lessons we're teaching them. But
yeah.
you think about it, we disengage our grandkids by controlling them through money, through gifts, through vacations.
Mm,
We do this. We have may all have an overall lack of empathy.
right,
These kids needs to know we have feelings.
right.
So the grandparents may comply children to do certain things, respect them. So we turn that off.
Mm,
If anybody's listening to this and you're a grandparent, please think about what can you do to really be more involved in your grandkids' lives? Because again, we are the ones that teach them the lessons like you did.
right.
Those lessons they're not going to, when 40 years from now, he's going to remember that. And
Yeah.
that's going to be the lesson that you taught him, the legacy that you passed on.
So are you writing any more children's books or what's on the horizon? What do you got planned?
I'm working on I Don't Want to Turn 4. So
Okay.
that's the next book. But interesting, my granddaughter Olivia came to me last week and she says, Gramps, I got a great idea for our next book. And I said, what's that? And she's 9
Oh,
years
so
old.
now it's y'all's book.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. She says, our new book says, I don't want to turn 10. And I said, what? Well, why don't you want to turn 10? She says, well, I've got to start worrying about learning how to drive. I said, that's 7 years away. Why
Yeah.
are you worrying about that now? She says,
Mm.
and I got to worry about, I got to start picking out a college. I said, that's 9 years away. Why are you worrying about that now? And she says, and the fifth graders I see, they got a lot more homework than us fourth graders. And I said, she says, I think we can write a book. I don't want to turn 10. But when you think about that,
Yeah.
we all have those. I don't want to turn 21. I don't want to turn
Mm.
70. I don't want to turn 39.
Right, right.
There's themes for all of us because we're looking back at what we did and we're looking to the future, and it's uncertain. So so that's going to be the themes of my upcoming books.
And so the stories are through the lens of the children, or is it through the lens of you watching them, or is it kind of
No, it's
by those?
the lens of the Jordan is the star of I Don't Want to Turn Three. It's through his eyes.
Okay.
He's the one that's writing the book. Yeah. And that kind of goes back to the theory of why we have at an early age as grandparents and parents
Mm.
have got to get our kids into reading books.
Mm-hmm.
Again, they're coming
Yes.
off the internet, they got to do that. So what can we do? Well, the best thing we can do is making sure that reading a book, becomes part of these kids' routine. And it only takes you 20 minutes to read a book at the most.
Right.
But it creates all kinds of benefits. So picture you as a grandpa. You got your child on your lap. What's going on? Well, first thing is it creates bonding.
Mm.
It's a nice way just to spend time with your kids, much like you're going bowling with your 22-year-old. This is a
Mm.
great time just to sit there and spend time with your child, one-on-one, to keep that going. Another reason that we need to be reading books to our kids and all the time is it creates listening skills. Now,
Right.
you and I both know as we grew older, listening skills is the best skill we can have. You as a podcaster, you've got to be able to listen to what you're doing to create what you want to create. So,
Mm-hmm.
so you've got, the listening skills. I need to have listening skills just for selling or buying or whatever I do. We can create those early on with these little kids. That's a legacy we can leave. We got to read books to kids because it creates cognitive and language development. There are
Mm-hmm.
plenty of words in these books these kids don't understand, so it gives you a chance to explain it. There's plenty of words in these books I don't understand. I got to go look up.
Yep.
So it's a great way to create that bonding in the language and development, and just help improve who they are. Another reason is attention span. These 2, 3, 4-year-olds, they bounce off the wall all day. Get them in your lap for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
You've got to keep
That's tough for
concentration.
me.
Yeah, yeah. Keep conversation. You got self-discipline. It's
Yeah.
just a great way to do that. So I would encourage any of your listeners, that make sure you take the time to read to your kids and teach them to read. It's just that thing that we can add that makes so much more sense.
Yeah, I think that's interesting when you said listening, right? I don't know how many meetings I've been in, professionally with sales folks, and they're just talking. I'm like, be quiet. Let let the customer say something, right? Just you got to listen to be able to formulate your next question or your next move or whatever you want to do. And I think, reading actually does that, because when you can read and you can visualize what you're reading, it's almost like you're listening to them say it as you're reading it, right? It's that whole process of just not reading and, reading a bunch of words, but putting that all together into a story and then visualizing it in your head and actually playing it out as a person. When I write, I can actually visualize what I'm writing. I really, and then I try to get all the details. Like I'll put something down and then I'll go back later and then add a lot of details. Oh, they need to do this. Like she leaned over and picked up a rock, right? Or it was sunny outside, because I want the reader to feel that they're in that them, or they're in that situation with that person. And I think that's part of listening, watching, observing, everything you need to do. And I think I learned a lot of those skills in the military.
You really hit on to it as salespeople. Listening is your number one skill. It really,
Yes.
because you do what your customers want you to do.
Mm.
You don't tell them what to do. So you're absolutely
Yeah.
right.
It's not like you ever say, well, I have a solution for you. And you're like, your customer's like, How do you know it's a solution for me? You know, whatever it is, right? So yeah, but I do like the kids books, and this month is Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. And the toughest thing I have ever done as a grandfather was visit my granddaughter in the cancer ward. That is tough. I mean, if you want people say, I'm having a bad day. You're having a bad day? Go to a children's hospital and sit in a cancer ward for about 30 seconds. And it changes your whole demeanor on what you think is a bad day. So, people, listen to this and watching it, I highly recommend, even if you don't have grandkids or kids, somebody that does, and get involved in stuff like that, because you never know. I mean, it's like meteoric, right? It hits you right then. So, go out, and it's important being a grandkid, a grandfather, or grandparent before, after, and during everything of the turbulence of life. And not only are you a grandparent, you're still a parent to your kids, right? So you've got to be able to do all that. You got to be a parent all the time, no matter. I don't care how old they are. My daughter's 40, but I still give her advice. She gives me advice now, which is just crazy. My other daughter's turning 40 this year also. So it's interesting how everything kind of works out.
It's taking your thought about the turbulence of life, because we are in a tremendous amount of
Oh yeah.
turbulence. I mean, just think about what this pandemic has done to our lives.
Mm.
The average age of people today has dropped 2 years because
Mm-hmm.
of the deaths that have occurred because of COVID-19. In 2019, the average age was 78 years and 10 months. In 20 it was 77 years and 3
Yeah.
months. 21 it was 76 years and 1 month. I mean, think about what has happened. So we as parents and grandparents, we're here today. We could be gone tomorrow. There's all
Mm-hmm.
kinds of reasons we can be gone tomorrow. That's why we have to jump in and take responsibility and share our knowledge. This pandemic has kids reading less. According to the United Nations Education, Scientific, and Culture Organization, I think it's called UNESCO, 584 million children worldwide are experiencing reading difficulties. Put that number in your head. That was before the pandemic, 460 million. So that's a 20% increase in kids that are having problem reading just because we went through this pandemic. That wipes out 2 years, 2 decades of educational gains that this world has made. The Stanford Graduate School of Education released a report saying that the second and third graders' fluency today is 30% less than before the pandemic.
Yeah.
30% less. That's why we have got to get involved. It takes, yes, mom and dad raise the kids, but it really takes a village in today's world, especially with all these single parents. Grandparents have got to get involved in helping raise the kids. Uncles, aunts, cousins, we all have got to get involved. And so, think through that. As we, as baby boomers, are selfish doing our own little thing, we've got to get back involved in these kids' lives.
Yeah. A family is a team sport, right? It takes a team to raise a family. And whether that family is your kids or your nieces or nephews or grandkids, it's all a team effort. So my wife, when our son was born, my wife's German, so she taught him German, was his first language. So she'd read him books in German, right? And now he's fluent in German, of course, but but he knows these stories in German from a German perspective, and so he's done very well for himself. But I think that's all about learning different languages or reading. Take 5 minutes and 10 minutes and set with your grand. Let's say you don't even have a kid's book. Whatever book you have that's age appropriate, of course. Whether it's a business book, how do you close a sale? I mean, because you're selling yourself all the time, whether you're need it or not. Everybody's in sales, and it depends on what you're trying to sell. But so I highly recommend, or go down to the local bookstore, get you a nice children's book. I don't want to turn 3.
That's a good one.
And yeah, that's a fantastic one. And by the same time, get the secrets of retelling. So when you're not with your grandkids, you can read that, and then sit down and just read portions of a book and watch the expression on the kid's face as you're reading it, because you can see they're like, oh, what's next? Oh, what's going to happen. And I think that's important because then that builds those skills of anticipation.
That's a great way of putting it.
And I highly recommend that. Um, now, I'll write something and I'll send it to my son who goes, write it like this. I'm like, man, where'd you learn how to write? Because I know not for me. Taking advice from a 22-year-old, 25-year-old. Oh my goodness. But that's great. So, Gramps, I think it's been great talking to you today. This went places I hadn't thought of, especially with the professional side, because I think there's a lot of knowledge out there that can be still tapped and cultivated, and then bringing that younger generation up where they get inquisitiveness, right? A sense of adventure, a sense of learning about other things that is outside of their sphere, outside of their immediate environment is important. And whether it's learning about another culture, you're writing as a blogger from travel. People are probably reading that today going, you know what? I think I want to go there. I want to, is it still there? Right? What's changed? So I think that's very cool to me. I mean, that's interesting.
Great. Well, it all pulls together for any of your listeners that are baby boomers or becoming one. Myself and 3 other partners have put together a site called babyboomer.org. And it's a place where you can learn all kinds of things. Learn from the knowledge of us baby boomers, and there's articles, and podcasts, and all kinds of things that the listeners can see that kind of pull all this together too. So have your people check it out. It should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, so that's babyboomer.org.
That's right, babyboomer.org.
Excellent. Well, I'm looking. I think I'm gonna have to pick that book up, and my grandkids like to read. So I'm gonna have to pick a book up, and I appreciate the time, especially on Labor Day. So folks, we're doing this on a holiday, so it's important for everybody. It's important for us to make sure. So again, I want to thank you very much, Gramps, and folks, check out his book. Go to the website babyboomers.org, and everybody have a fantastic day. Thank you. Thank you for listening to Author Eke. There'll be another episode next week. Please stop by and start your own story. We can't wait to hear it.